To Barcelona for today's F1 Collegiate Series, F1 second round in Barcelona. I'm excited for this one. Kind of a boring track, but is what it is. Welcome to the Ireland Esports Collegiate Winter Series powered by Natives. And we are back for the second round of the F1 here in Barcelona. Bear in mind, last week was in Bahrain. And today I am joined by Sapitron, my lovely co-host.
Oh, happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Gib. And say thanks to the series for having me back on for another season. No, it's going to be a great race tonight. I know that, Spain is a little bit hit or miss in terms of the track quality itself, but you get the right conditions, you can still have some great racing on there.
It is a very fast track, but just not very technical, which is, not as much time for things to go wrong, which is what we like to see here. Not for the racers, of course, but it's always entertaining for us.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be entertaining. I'm looking forward in particular to seeing how the drivers in those sort of opening laps try to find some of their positions and try to sort of establish where they want to set themselves up on track. I mean, if we have a bit of a look later on, we'll get to have a proper deep dive into the characteristics of the track. But of course, we had quite a previous round, didn't we?
It was definitely an interesting round. So unfortunately, Ella crashed in qualifying, so started back of the grid, but then managed to claw her way up to third place in the standings at the end of the race. Freedom and Speeder were battling it out between the two of them. They were so fast. There wasn't much time between them. Unfortunately, Nico had on turn one of lap one just binned it into the wall and was kind of out of the race at that point. So hopefully he can have a bit of a better race today.
Yeah, hopefully so. And Spain does also allow for a lot of variance in the strategy. We've got the track map out on the screen for a split second there. We're going to see a lot of fighting, particularly towards turn 1 and turn 10. So just coming out of the DRS zone of the start and finish straight, and then the second or the first DRS zone, depends who you ask, is going to be heading into turns 10 and 11, a sort of big slowdown, big braking zone, and a lot of opportunities for drivers to maybe go for some moves down the inside. But that is going to be, of course, a story we'll have to watch to unfold as these drivers are very soon going to be making their way to the track.
It'll be interesting to see how the drivers go about their tire strategies this time round. Now, Freedom started out on hards last race, and he was very aggressive with his braking and wore down those tires quite quickly, considering they were hards, and then went on to the mediums and I think finished the race on mediums, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, and I think that the tire strategy and the variance that we're going to see is going to be pretty big. So they can push early on the soft and go for a hard stint all the way to the end. They can try and balance it out in the mediums until they have such a point where they can choose between soft or hard. Depends how good they are on the tire conservation, to be honest. I know Freedom, at least from what you said about how they gauge the hards, isn't the best when it comes to that department, but what they lack in the tire management, they more than make up for in pace.
Yeah, he's a very fast racer, and Speeder is also very fast, having a 1:30 as the fastest lap last race.
I know that we are going to be jumping very soon into the race. We're going to be shortly going trackside for qualifying. I guess a question that I certainly have is, who should we keep our eye on in qualifying out here?
Oh, that's a good question. I think Speeder and Freedom are both going to be putting out those very competitive speeds as they did last race. It was in qualifying, it was a case of one of them got the fastest lap, then the next got the fastest lap, and it was a 1-2, one after the other, and they were very much on that push. It'll be interesting to see if Ella can actually make it through qualifying this race, as she did have that unfortunate stint coming out of the hairpin in Bahrain, opened the DRS and sent it into the wall. And again, we didn't see much from Nico or Colm or Minikai last race, So it'll be interesting to see where they fall on this kind of faster, less technical track in the grid standings.
Yeah, and I certainly think there's a lot more potential on the table here for the drivers. You said it yourself, say Ella, unfortunately, she didn't quite get the chance that she wanted. So maybe Spain is the one where she really gets to prove herself out here. But we are going to be going trackside now as we have qualifying now officially underway. 17 minutes 30 seconds, and these drivers are going to be looking to get some times on the board. Curiously, nobody's going out right out the gate. They're waiting, they're biding their time a little bit, as it looks a little bit overcast here in Catalunya.
Yeah, and oh, somebody's just leaving the pits now as you kind of finish that sentence up. We see two drivers going out there. Freedom is going for his outlap, and did you say Drippin?
Yeah, Drippin's going to be first out, and they're on inters. Interesting here.
That's an interesting strategy, not going for the softs for qualifying, but it might benefit them in the long run.
Yeah, well, maybe they're factoring their wider strategy for tires in. They're using potentially the inters just to, one, lay some rubber down, and two, potentially just get a feel of the track. I often find that if you get into a situation where you are used to a lower level of grip, when you get to push a bit more, you can get deceptively fast times, maybe even surprise yourself. But Inter's early game is an interesting choice considering the track surface is dry. They're going to be burning up very quick.
Yeah, and because because the track is still green, a little bit of sliding there. Oh, into the barrier. Ooh, Drippin didn't come out of that quite as well as he had hoped into the gravel. He's kind of staying off the track for the time being. Going to be coming back on now. I wonder if that will have a result on his qualifying. Did he take some damage from that? He might have shaken his confidence going into that turn.
Yeah, maybe a little bit of a confidence getting hurt for sure. Doesn't look like the car has any meaningful damage, but Freedom is going to be the first car to be out there and now pushing on a full core lap. Let's see what they can do. Turn one looking nice and sharp there. And we're going to see them try and use all of the available track space nice and tight to the inside through turn three, keeping it committed until about the final 15 meters, braking just after the 50-meter ball. Very aggressive on those inters, despite them being an unsuitable compound for the current situation. Pushing hard, laying some rubber down, and also getting a bit of an early metric as to the kind of pace. Sector 1 looking very nice, but now turn 6, 7, and 8 is probably the most technical part of the course, as you have to almost jink your car to the left side before it opens back up out into turns 8 and 9. A little bit of DRS here as we come up to the 10th corner of this circuit, and one of the prime overtaking opportunities alongside turn 1. Looking quick, looking brisk, as the final sector now opens up, no longer with the chicane. It's a quick shot all the way through the final two right-handers and up to the finish line. What is Freedom going to be able to get here? Let's see the kind of pace they have on tap. Show us what championship material is made of. It's a 15.685 on the inters. Is there going to be a response from the rest of the field?
That's a very competitive time there. Bearing in mind, in real life, Daniel Ricciardo has the lap record for this track at a 118. So very competitive in this sim for having a 115 there. And Speeder has dropped a 112.
Quite an impressive run there. Minicar is going to be a 13.6 as well, with Baton with a 15.508. So Sobs definitely being the tire to go to in this situation. Baton getting a 15.5, it does put a little bit in perspective how Freedom is really pushing those inters. Of course, 12s are the rough sort of time zone that we would be expecting from these compounds in this situation. So a few seconds certainly to be made up, but if nothing else, Freedom has a time on the board now. He's got something that he can fall back on as a means of a safety net, as Ghost has just come through with a 13.828, just a couple tenths shy of Minikai, but enough for the second row.
Yeah, these are very competitive speeds coming out on track here, with current standings being Speeder, Minikai, Ghost, Obituary, Freedom, and Chris there has no time there. So we're looking in and around 2 or 3 seconds between first place and fifth place right now. So very competitive times, a lot closer than, well, Freedom is very close to everybody else considering he is on those inters and everybody else seems to be on softs. So he's definitely pushing the car quite aggressively and getting the most out of those tires as he can.
Well, it's all going to factor into the wider strategy too as well. So saving themselves by going on a set of inters can give them more opportunities for qualifying runs later on. They'll have one extra life, so to speak, compared to the rest of the field, who is going to have a set soft allocation and they don't want to burn it. It's also good maybe factor into the race too and making sure they have the most options available. So Freedom and Drippin currently on the inters, 15.6 and a 17.5 respectively. Only 2 drivers left to put a time on the board.
Big
Is
spin.
Nico's. Oh, Nico with the big spin though. Unfortunate as they come out of turn 4. It's certainly going to be a redo there for them. And then Ella, who is currently in the pits after a previous attempt got invalidated.
Yeah, that's unfortunate for Nico there, being that he had a crash on turn 1 of the last race and had a couple spins throughout the rest of the race as well. I'm wondering, maybe did Bahrain knock his confidence a little bit, or he's possibly pushing for those places up on the front of the grid and just isn't quite able to control the car going in at those speeds into those turns.
I think it's also about how you balance the throttle. Turn 4, you have to be very precise with when you really get back on that power. And we can, of course, look to some of the other drivers as example of this. You have to almost feather the throttle as you go through the apex, slightly earlier apex through turn 4, as it opens up towards the second half. So sort of being careful, knowing when to push, and knowing not to get on the throttle too early. It's better to be a little bit slower and push it late than go too early, risk kicking the rear out, and then you get a situation like Nico found themselves in.
Yeah, exactly what I was going to say. You read my mind. So we have Chris here, who's in P2, doing another flying lap. Already has 2 laps on there. A little squirrely coming out of that turn, down past the start-finish line, and is going for another lap there, another flying lap.
Oh, they just burned out their battery, so I don't think this is going to be the one, but they did improve to a 0.488. It's not enough to display Speeder out of the top and the pole position, but they did get at least a little bit of improvement, which might help the confidence here.
How are you feeling seeing the drivers in qualifying currently in their current paces? How are you feeling this race is going to go? Are we going to see, bearing in mind that's it's not the longest of pit lanes coming in from turn 14. Are we going to see any time penalties because of that, like we did last race?
I think some drivers are definitely going to try and push the boundaries. So far, things are looking like we're going to have 2 distinct battles. We're going to have a battle near the top with the current drivers who are sat on 112. So Speeder and Chris, they are looking very much neck and neck. And I think Chris has a bit more in the tank to really challenge Speeder for that potential pole. We haven't seen Freedom and Drippin at their best just yet. We haven't seen them out on a full core lap with the soft compound of tyre. So there's still plenty to be shown from them. But I do think that is going to... The pit lane is going to be deceptively quick on them. They're not going to maybe be expecting how sharp they need to get on the brakes when they go round that right-hander through turn 14.
Not sure if we'll see many of... I can't think of the words now. I'm not sure we're going to see any track infringements or many track infringements on this track, as you know, if you have that space to use all of the track, it's quite a wide track. There's not very many narrow turns in it. So I doubt we'll see very many track infringements and penalties because of that. But I could be proven wrong, as I seem to have a commentator's curse.
If there's any place that drivers are going to go wide, it's going to be pushing it a little bit at the final corner and maybe peeling out a little bit too wide on turn 3 as you maybe get too much on the throttle. You start to experience a little bit of understeer. Ghost just put down a very solid time indeed. 6/10 down. It's going to push themselves up into P3 and in front of Minikai. So has managed to assert themselves in that top 3 here in quali. We have got Ella and Nico both out on laps. Nico having just started, and then Ella is going through. But Speeder has just broken into the 111s with a .880 and is looking to extend their lead. Drippin's come through with a 12.7 and is going to push Ghost back down to the latter half of the second row. Minikai now down into row 3, but many other drivers still yet to push. Freedom is coming up to the line now. Let's see what they can do. It's a 12.2. It's not enough for Speeder, but it is enough for the front row.
Yeah, and that's what we've come to expect from Freedom since the last race. And I know he's been quite competitive in previous series as well. And we kind of know he has those times in him, and will definitely give Speeder a run for his money off the starting line. It's kind of a case of last race, it was a battle for the two of them. Oh, big spin from Nico as well. Again, just really trying to push through a lot of these turns and not quite having it in him to get through them without having those spins.
I think Nico is really overdriving the car a little bit here. We've only got 6 minutes left on the clock. What Nico needs to do at this point, it doesn't matter if it's the highest pace in the world, just needs something on the board. A solid banker lap time could put them even a couple of positions ahead of some of their rivals. Even if it's not the pace that they wanted, they need to get something on there at this point. I'd take what I can get.
Yeah, it's kind of a case of if you don't put a lap time down, you're going to be in last place. So you might as well just get something down rather than pushing yourself too much and, like you said, overdriving the car and not giving yourself that safety net of a lap time that might put you 2 or 3 positions higher than you would if you keep having those spins out on track on those flying laps.
We've got that high pressure on them, certainly. And the final few runs are going to be coming through now as we are reaching the final 5 minutes of the session. Chris has just come in, and in their place, Minikai and Baton both going to be coming out now for what is going to be either the penultimate or their final runs out here on the circuit. Quali is looking to be a pretty stacked battle, particularly with the top 5.
Yeah, they all seem very close in time in the top 5. And, you know, we didn't see Drippin last race. We didn't see Chris last race. And we didn't see Ghost last race. So it'll be interesting to see how they shake up the table going forward in this race and in future events. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how things shake up from this race, how it'll affect the standings, bearing in mind that they are all very close in time.
Yeah, very close indeed. I've just got a word from the drivers' chat and some of the internal discussions. The reason that we didn't see any damage from some of the incidents is because damage was in fact not turned on. So we will be having a short break to reset the lobby, it looks like, in between the quali and the race. So drivers will stay in the lobby to minimize downtime, but there will just need to be a settings change, and that will introduce a little bit of a gap between what is the end of qualifying out here and the start of the race in full. Ella has just started their lap in other news, and looking to the rest of the field, we've got drivers with the pressure certainly on. Baton being one of them as they're coming up to the end of their lap now.
Yeah, I think that no damage has definitely lent itself to Nico. Possibly could be the reason that he's been pushing the car so hard and overdriving in those situations, being that he doesn't have to worry about crashing, damaging the car, and not making it to the end of quali. Ella is doing pretty well, keeping a lot of speed through those turns, going down into, I've lost, a little bit squirrely coming out of that. This is the downhill section into turn 7. you can hold a lot of speed going into turn 7, coming down the hill from turn 6 into turn 7. You can hold quite a lot of speed, but if you push the car too much, you'll go out wide. But you need that speed to carry yourself back up the hill in turns 8 and 9, coming down the straight across the line, putting herself in P5. This is impressive. This is impressive qualifying.
Yeah, it was a solid run there from Ella. It's a consistent run all the way through. No major drops in any particular sector. Although, on the topic of sectors, we have Speeder and Freedom getting the exact same Sector 3 time. 21.191. Down to the millisecond, their Sector 3 times are identical, which is crazy to me out here. We got Minikai as well, looking to make a little bit of a push. They've made up some time on their previous sectors, so looking about 0.3 of a second up according to live timings, and we'll see what they can do here as they bring themselves down for the final couple of corners towards the end of the lap. 2 minutes left on the clock, so it's final chances for these drivers. Minikai's going to get an improvement, but it's not enough for a position.
Yeah, and Nico is coming out to his out lap now for a final attempt of putting a time on the board. Cutting it very close, in my opinion. Hasn't had the best of luck in this qualifying, has been pushing the car to its limit and pushing himself past his own limit, it seems. But at least, hopefully, we'll try and get something on the board. Even if it's last place, I think it's a case of having had a couple of chances to put a lap time down and spinning out on pretty much all of them, or not getting, what he wants out of the car. But at least it is a time on the board.
Yeah, they just need something at this stage. We had Baton getting an improvement earlier, but only enough for a 14.6. So a solid lap here from Nico could catapult them through the field. And at this point, it's sink or swim. Nico knows that this is their only chance to get something down on the books and get themselves into a meaningful position heading into the race. So we'll have to stick on board with them as they go through and start their lap in full.
Yeah, coming into their flying lap, going to take a fair amount of speed into turn 1 there. You can carry a lot of speed through turns 2 and 3. If you're able to keep it quite tight going through those corners, you can carry a lot of speed through there. Carrying a lot of speed through all of these corners, definitely pushing the car and trying to get a somewhat decent time on the board there.
Yeah, well, they're absolutely roasting their front left tire right now. That's going to be the tire to watch in terms of temperature and degradation, because it is going to be pushed to its absolute limits. Most of the high-speed corners, particularly turns 3 and 4, are going into the right, and that's going to put that excessive pressure on. But looking nice and quick so far. Nico is going to potentially put a good time on the boards, but the checker flag has officially fallen, and we're going to see what these drivers can put down in their final surges. Nothing from Drippin, nothing from Ella. Minikai, and we do see a couple more cars now pushing through the field. Let's see what Nico can do, though. Can they get a good time? It's a 13.1. As other drivers have launched themselves a little bit further up. Ghost has taken a bit of a promotion. Nico has got themselves up into P7. And we do see one more car on track. That's going to be Chris. Is there going to be enough for a position there? They're only 2 milliseconds faster in the end. So no positions gained. They're going to remain on row 2.
Yeah, and look, Nico got that lap time in there in the end. Got up to P7 there, I think. If
Yes.
Take a look there. Yeah, P7. So got his lap in eventually, got P7. So, we'll be happy enough with that. And so going in to the race, our front row will be Speeder and Freedom. Second row is Drippin and Chris. Third row, I can't speak today, is Ghost and Ella. Fourth row is Nico, and I didn't quite see who that was. Is that Nico and Minikai, and then Obituary is there in last place, unfortunately for him. But, could have the possibility of climbing up through the grid throughout the race. We just don't know, and that's why we love this sport. After our short break, we've restarted the lobby twice now. So we are into the formation lap. It seems like Ghost and Ella are disqualified already. Interesting. So we'll have to see what comes of that. Yeah, I wonder if that's a mistake or if there's something that's happened in the formation lap that we didn't quite see.
Yeah, well, they will sort of return to their positions, I believe. It just means they won't have a chance to warm up the tyres on the formation and get those core temps up to a working window. They'll struggle for maybe a couple of laps, but it shouldn't take long for them to get back up to parity with the rest of the field now.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just reading through the driver's chat here, seeing if there's any update as to what happened, but yeah, it seems like there was a bad turn out of turn 1 and some people flew off and a bit of damage was incurred. So that seems to be our update for the formation lap as to what actually happened. So yeah, I'm excited to get this race underway. How about you, Sappy? How are you feeling?
I'm pretty excited, I gotta say. It's going to be a lot of wild cards thrown in there because I'm looking at the tyre strategy. We've got Speeder, Ella, and Nico on softs. We have Drippin, Chris, Kai, and Baton on mediums, and then you have Ghost and Freedom on the hards. So every strategy is in play. There's going to be plenty of counterplay, and there's going to be a lot of strategic options for this entire field as we get the race underway in just a moment. A couple of drivers not lining up 100% here, but here we go. This is the race start. 3, 4, 5 red lights. The track is hot here in Spain for Ireland Esports Collegiate Series, and a solid start from Speeder is going to see him jump the field. Freedom not quite getting the launch that he was so desperately looking for, as he's going to be dropping all the way down to P4 now. Chris is going to be peeking for an opportunity around the outside through turn 1, side by side. Speeder is going to get a clean breakaway. This is a perfect scenario for him on the soft tire. Drippin going to be getting a gap of his own, and many other drivers looking to jostle for some positions. Mini Kai on the mediums, trying to fend off the 2 soft runners either side of him. Ella just up ahead, but arcing a little bit wide. This is going to be an opportunity for him to maybe push round, push through. Bit of contact between the two, as they are going to be fighting for the same track space, and someone had to give.
Yeah, that's a little bit of contact there. Is it going to affect them going throughout this race? I don't think much, if any, damage was taken on there. I think for the first couple of laps, bearing in mind where everybody's kind of positioned, I might be getting a little bit ahead of myself, but it seems like Speeder and Drippin are kind of pulling away, Chris in tow, and Freedom not having the best of starts. There's a lot of pushing, well, not pushing, but a lot of pull and pushing for the space on the track going into those turns there with Nico and Ella.
Nico being 110% commitment right now, as they wanted that P5 and they were stopping at nothing to get it. Ella's not letting it go without a fight, but there's big contact. Ella's getting hooked on the rear tire of Nico, and they're going to be dropped all the way down to P9 now. She's not going to be a happy one about that, as Minikai itself is going to be pushed down into P9 as a little bit of chaos has kicked off in the bottom half of the field. The two of them are going to be a couple of seconds adrift of the rest of the pack, and this is an opportunity, but Baton has also spun round out of turn 4, has dropped the rears maybe a little bit in the grass there, and they are going to be the new holder of P9, as the bottom 3 are now miles away from the field, and this looks like an opportunity for the mid pack to start to displace. At the top as well, Drippin has been chasing Chris down. Freedom is trying to stay within the tow, within about a second's gap, because they need that DRS in their pocket in order to make this move work. But right now, Drippin is going to be the one to watch as they're trying their best to close in on Chris.
Yeah, it seems like the grid has very much dispersed. Chris coming in, Speeder originally, then Chris very closely behind with a 1:15 fastest lap. So very close in times there. Very, very, very close. And Drippin is hot on Chris's tail as well. Freedom, again, trying to close that gap in a little bit, but it seems that the grid is very dispersed after that first or second lap. You know, a bit of contact happening. Minikai is in the pits after that debacle that occurred, and it's going to be a case of, can the rest of the drivers catch up to the front four? Nico has got a chance to. Ghost has gotten a time penalty there, a 3-second time penalty.
Yeah, just extending the track a little bit too much there. So already was on 3 warnings just a moment ago, and that was the straw that broke the stewards' backs. 3 seconds added onto their final race time. Luckily, Ella is 4 seconds behind right now, so that won't mean a change in position, but still, that is going to put a damper on any kind of upward moves that they make through this field. Drippin, Chris, and Speeder make your top 3 right now. Freedom is barely within the 1 second window. Speeder has got an ideal opportunity for himself. Get an early extension, go for the push, but right now Drippin is closing in hot, heading into turn 1, down the inside. Chris is not going to let it slip so easy, as they're going to be side by side, jostling for the same spots, and Drippin eventually through turn 2, and now into turn 3, extending all the way out to the edge of the track, making sure that Chris has nowhere to retaliate, nowhere to go. And this is going to be likely a story that continues to go back and forth for several laps, as the rest of the field has different priorities. Speeder, just trying to get some time. Freedom, just staying within a second. On those hards, all he needs to do right now is keep within proximity, and he can potentially win out on strategy. And then for the rest of the midfield and the lower end of the pack, well, your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah, and being that there are only 9 drivers in, there's a chance for points for everybody, and it's just a case of who's going to get the most. And at the moment, it's looking like Speeder might come away with those 25 points if he can keep up this pace and keep that gap between himself and Drippin. But Drippin is hard on the push, and Chris is hot on his heels, coming for that P2 position. Freedom, again, trying to keep that gap from opening up. Chris going for a move, taking P2, just going into turn 1, taking that position from Drippin, and Drippin's going to be, well, here we see, hot on his tails. A little bit of contact it looked like there. Very much pushing to get that position back from Chris.
I'd advise the two of them to be careful, because enough back and forth is going to wear thin the patience of the drivers, which means the moves get more rash, more opportunistic, and it can end in tears if you're not careful. So Drippin, got to keep his awareness on point here, as Chris does tend to burn battery a lot faster than Drippin does. He can maybe get this on a longer term strategy. And someone else who is also going to have to watch their flanks is Speeder, because as much as they do have command of the race right now, those softs are not going to last forever. They're already starting to show some signs of thermal degradation, and they're no longer going to be in their prime by this point. So this is a chance for the mediums runners to get a bit of time back on them.
Yeah, and it might just come down to pit strategy. Like you say, did you say that Freedom is on hards again?
Yes.
And he's very hard on braking and very hard on those tires, but he can use that to his advantage. He won't have to pit as soon as the rest of the 3 racers ahead of him, and can kind of stay at a little bit longer. Caution on sector 1 there. Safety car coming out.
That's going to be for Ghost. Ghost has crashed out just coming out of turn 2, and their car was terminally damaged. So the full course safety is now out. This is a blessing in disguise for Speeder. I'm just going to call it outright, because going at that early stint on soft and now being able to potentially take the hards, maybe even to the end of the race if they're conservative on them, this is a massive boost to potential strategy options.
Yeah, he can go into the pits, change out to mediums or hards, depending on how he's feeling. Like you said, he could go for hards and go on them for the rest of the race if he's conservative. And he has that kind of gap between himself and Chris, that he could go for those hards and use that breathing room. He's not sucking in hot air from cars in front of him, and could go for that as his final pit stop 6 laps in.
I see the top 4 all heading into the pits. Nico going to following suit, and the rest of the field is likely going to do exactly the same to take advantage of this rapidly evolving situation. Ella's going to be in as well, and then Baton and Mini Kai are likely going to be very soon behind. What tires are they going to be on is the question. I can see Speeder going out on the hards as predicted. Chris and Drippin also going onto the hard compounded tire. Freedom, where they started on the hards, has no choice but to go onto the medium. So they're going to have to be very careful on how they push those tires to make sure they're within that thermal envelope and not burn themselves out too quickly. Nico's going to be on medium. Baton is going to be staying out on their original compound, which I find very interesting, trying to get a bit of positions gained rather than focusing on the freshest tires. Ella out on hards, and Minikai now coming in on the soft right now, but is going to be switching to a set of that looks like white walls. Yes, that is another set of hards. So you have 5 drivers who are on the hard compound and 3 drivers on the medium.
Yeah, that's an interesting strategy, bearing in mind that we're only 7 laps in. Are these drivers going to be able to capitalize on the speed of the mediums, but not wear them down so fast that they have to make another pit stop pretty soon after having this safety car come out and using that to their advantage?
Well, I have to, of course, wonder how the drivers are going to fare with this sort of strategic shakeup. But one thing is a concern to me right now. I'm looking at Drippin's front wing, and I'm noticing that the end plate is missing. The front left has got 80% damage. So either it didn't get replaced during the pit stop window, or he's just incurred damage over this safety car lap by accidentally. And oh, that's going to be a contact again, I think, with Chris. And a penalty, in fact, being dished out for the collision right there. So he's going to be jumping into the pits once again to get that front wing replaced.
Yeah, and that's not a great penalty to get. Is that a 30-second penalty? I mean, it's good to get it while the safety car's out, but also at the same time, you want to avoid getting as many penalties as possible. And yet, getting the front wing replaced there. So like you said, it was probably during the behind the safety car, had a little bit of contact with somebody or something and just managed to do his wing in and have to come in for another pit stop.
Oh, the 30 seconds of penalties might as well be a race ender for him, unless there's some way that he can get those served, get them removed, get them off his plate. It's looking like curtains for him no matter what he does, because after this safety car, the field is going to stay bunched for a majority of the race. So unless he can come out on top at the very front of the grid and do so by several seconds, it's not going to be the best result for him. This might be a race to forget here in Spain.
Yeah, it's... Again, you've got to be careful of those penalties. Try not to incur them as much as possible, because it's going to put a hamper on the rest of your race. And like you said, it could be the end of the race for him. It could be, that's it. Pack up your bags and pick up rubber.
There you go. The safety car is going to be in this lap, and Speeder is going to be the one in control of the pace. When he sets off, could leave his opponents off guard. And some of them are already shaken a little bit on the confidence front. We've got Freedom internally complaining about his setup, saying it doesn't feel right. It's not where he wants it to be. So maybe he's not feeling that confident in the car right now. And considering the pace between Speeder and Freedom, these are the two that are going to be having to push out and bring their A-game. Speeder's going to be jumping on it. A little bit of skittishness on that rear axle. Not going to get the start he so desperately wanted. Chris is going to capitalize on the opportunity as we go for green flag once more. Ignore the top left. It's a full call racing once again. Chris is going to immediately take the chance. Make a little bit of contact on the side of Speeder. But there you go. He's going to be getting himself into the lead of the race as we get back into racing once more. Minikai taking a bit of a drop. And Freedom is going to take the chance as well. Down the inside into turn 4. Looking nice and sharp there. Clean move. Pushing as far as he can. Keeping the space though for his opponent. Good sportsmanship, but still a quality overtake as he's now into P2 and looking to press that medium advantage.
And it looks to me that Drippin might be listening to the stream, as he has retired just before the race set off again after that safety car.
Yeah, saying he had to retire regardless of the penalties. So maybe there was something a little bit more at play for him there. But here you go, Freedom is going to be around the outside, heading through turns 10 and confirming it through. Nicely done there from the medium runner, as they are now going to be in that prime position to start using that pace advantage, pushing a bit of a gap, and ideally leaving Chris out of the DRS so he can focus on fighting with Speedo. It's now been enabled, and he's got a job to do.
Yeah, and although he has that compound advantage over Chris, he needs to be careful. We have seen that Freedom is very hard on tires. So yes, he might be able to open that gap up a little bit, but he might have to make another pit stop later on in the race. We are now 10 laps in. Obituaries had a spin there, has dropped back down to P7, which is unfortunate for him.
Well, he's still got his OG set of tyres from the start of the race, don't forget. So he is not only going to be having a difficulty in position, but he's going to be having to deal with those tyres that are significantly more worn down than his competitors. When you've got about 9 laps on the mediums, you're looking at anywhere from 20 to 30% wear. But the big factor is not actually the tyre wear in the compound. It's the thermals. You get those tires too hot, you are going to be in some serious trouble. You're going to get inconsistent levels of grip. You're going to be accelerating that tire wear even faster. And in some cases, we're seeing drivers that, compared left side to right side, have double the tire wear on the outer edge. Just a few laps ago, we had Freedom on his opening set of tires. He had 10% wear on the left side and 6% on average on the right. So it goes to show those thermals and that extra pressure can make a massive difference.
And while you were breaking down the thermal dynamics of the tire compounds for us very graciously, Speeder has made a move on Chris and taken P2, trying to close down that gap between himself and Freedom, being within that 1 second gap for DRS. And a commentator's curse has kicked in and he's dropped down to 1.2 seconds. So just out of range, but definitely having that push. And Chris, again, hot on his tail. So there's a definitive battle here. Speeder going wide on that turn, and Chris is going to take that opportunity to close that gap, take P2, and go after Freedom.
I'm looking temp to temp, and it looks like Speeder overall has much better control of his tire temperatures, so he's able to push harder for longer, even if it isn't the same peak grip. And that peak grip is what's allowing Chris to get those moves done, but not necessarily what's allowing him to keep them. As we see Speeder going down the start-finish straight. Nicely done. Very little competition there from Chris. He knows the writing is on the wall for his position, at least for the time being, and a nice closure of P2 for Speeder once again. We can see to sticking behind, sticking in that DRS range and keeping that gap closed, using it as an opportunity to recharge the battery, because he's burnt a lot of it throughout these past couple of laps, and he's going to need to spend some time recuperating before he goes on the attack once more.
Yeah, and while that is happening, Freedom is opening that gap on those mediums. He's taking advantage of the little bit of a battle going on behind him and opening up that gap to 2 seconds between himself and
safety
Speeder.
car once more. Sorry to interrupt you, Gib, but the safety car's out again because we have on-track debris from Minikai taking an incident out in turn 4. So the safety car, once again, going to make an appearance, going to be waving hi, waving hello, reminding us that they're still here, and they're here to bunch up the field once more.
Yes, it's very interesting that we've had 2 safety cars so far, and we're only on lap 12 out of 33. And it seems that Minikai has lost his entire front wing. So that is very unfortunate for Minikai there. And they are going to have to pit and get that replaced now.
Yep, that is going to be an unfortunate situation for them, so no doubt they're going to be heading into the pits. Curiously, Chris stayed out as the rest of the field, for the most part, headed in. And this is going to be a change-up in position, but is that trade-off going to be worth it, considering their competitors will now be on fresh tyres once more and have about 5 laps gain on them in terms of wear?
Yeah, and we see there that Nico has 6 laps on mediums, Whereas Freedom has now got 0 laps. He's fresh mediums. Speeder has fresh mediums. Ella has fresh mediums. And Obituary has fresh mediums. And well, Minikai has obviously had to go in for that wing replacement, but also has fresh mediums. So it's going to be interesting to see how Chris can control those temperatures in his tires and make sure he's not wearing them throughout the rest of this race. Is he going to try and stay out on those hards for the rest of the race, or is he going to have to come in for another pit stop? And Nico, again, on mediums with 6 laps on them, it's going to be interesting to see how he handles that for the rest of the race.
Well, it's going to be an equalizer for the rest of the field too. You've got 5 of them on equal fresh mediums. Nico on those 6-lap-olds and Chris on the 6-lap-old hards. Chris can still make a case for himself running this strategy to the end, but it is still going to be a struggle to keep that longevity in the tires and still retain a healthy pace. I'm really interested to see how Freedom and Speeder make it out of this one, because we've seen those two be as close as you can get in terms of pace, both having their strengths in different sectors of the track, and now going to be on even keel right next to each other as this race restarts. So I'll keep an eye on that second row.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting second row. The back 3 to 7 positions going to be able to capitalize on those worn out tires?
Well, let's see what they can do out here. So now with the field starting to bunch up, we are on lap 14. The safety car is projected to come back in this lap, so we'll be going green on lap 15 of 33, about halfway through the race distance. And so far, there hasn't been a dull moment. We've had some areas where the track has started to be dispersed with drivers, so no one really in proximity to each other. But just as soon as we get used to that, there's a safety car, or a driver makes a mistake and brings the others back in contention. There really isn't any real downtime with this race thus far, despite the track being renowned for, well, not being the most electrifying of layouts in terms of racing and league racing.
Yeah, and it's, like you said, Barcelona has that very long straight coming out of turn 14, if I'm not mistaken. Out of 14 into turn 1. Very, very long straight. A lot of opportunities to overtake, but a lot of the action has been not there. It's been on the rest of the track, which again isn't the most exciting of tracks within the F1 calendar. And we've seen a lot of action today.
We have indeed, but here we go, back to racing once more. Chris is in control and has set off just outside of the exit of the final corner. Good jump there, as it looks like they left Nico a little bit off guard. Freedom is going to be quickly closing in and making quick work of Nico there, and that almost jump on them has allowed them to break a gap between themselves and Speeder, the sort of main on-pace rival of the track, and they're going to be quickly hunting down Chris 10th after 10th. Speeder going very nicely, very elegantly around the outside through turn 3, confirming through turn 4, and quickly showing the difference in pace that just 6 laps of wear can make.
Yeah, and it's going to be difficult for him on those tires with 6 or 7 laps on them to keep that pace and to kind of keep up with the rest of the group as the front 2-3 cars pull away from the rest of the pack.
Yep. Big gaps are starting to be formed already, but Ego Freedom's going to be going for a move on the lead. Speeder is going to be right behind as well to see what spoils they can get from this battle. Nicely done through turns 10, confirm through the rest of this final sector here. Freedom has got quite the jump on Chris. Speeder could be soon joining them as they are right on the tail of the orange and green. DRS has now been enabled but isn't in effect for this straight, so they're going to have to wait to turn 10 to get that open wing benefit from the proximity. You see fights for P4, you see fights for P2 here as Speeder is once again reunited with Chris in a heated battle. Corner after corner, nobody is yielding an inch.
Yeah, and Freedom really needs to take advantage. I know he's fighting off Chris, but he needed to take advantage of that fight between Chris and Speeder happening behind him to open that gap up a little bit. And Chris is going to go for a move on Freedom, taking P1 from him. It's so close, this race. It's been the three of them front of the pack for pretty much 16 laps now, and they're just not giving each other any breathing room.
Well, Chris has pumped a lot into that move, so that could leave them out of pocket for any kind of a defense. As we're seeing right there, as Freedom has thrown a little bit of battery into the equation, and all of a sudden, they are back round once again through turn 10, and we're seeing a little bit of a replay of what happened last lap, almost to the T, even down to the position they pushed themselves into at the end of the lap. You've got Speeder now on the inside with a much more definitive advantage in terms of pace. They are drag racing through and through as they head down the start finish. Speeder is going to be covered off by Freedom, but he's having none of it. He's going to go for the double. He makes it 3-1 as he's going to be making an excellent surge. What a move there, as Freedom has been thoroughly left out to dry with the lack of DRS. Speeder now takes the top honors as Chico, aka Chris, and Freedom are going to be fighting for P2 now.
Yeah, it's very close, this race, and they've opened up that gap between themselves. Ella is, what, almost 4 seconds behind. Minikai has picked up a penalty, a 3-second penalty on the track there as they've been battling Ella there, and have managed to just, I think that's track infringements.
Yeah, that's track infringements.
Commentators, Chris, coming back, strikes again. Bearing in mind that at the start of this, during qualifying, I had said that track infringements aren't going to be as big of a deal.
Loving the fighting that's happening at both ends of the spectrum right now. Ella doesn't have as much pressure on her shoulders because all she needs to do is stay ahead of Nico. Minikai is effectively serving as a roadblock in this instance because that 3-second penalty is going to nullify any moves unless they severely break that DRS gap. We've got the fastest lap coming from Speeder as well as they're trying to get that breakaway, and Freedom is not really being given the option or the opportunity to escape to fight towards the front of the pack. Hopefully Chris is going to run out of juice at some point because you can see both Freedom and Chris are on the recharge lights. And then down at the bottom, Minikai, desperate to keep that position. They just lost it to Ella down at the start-finish straight, and they're going to be looking to get it back real soon.
Yeah, and those battles, that battle between Ella, Minikai, and Nico is going to give the front three the opportunity to open that gap up even more. And it's definitely two battles happening on the track at the moment. It's the front three, and then the next three, and then Obituary is kind of lagging a little bit behind everybody else there. And, well, Chris is now 11 laps on those hards, so it'll be interesting to see, can he keep up with those? You know, he's been in those battles, his tire temperatures are going to be rising quite drastically, being that he's having to defend Freedom. Freedom takes P2 from him, and is coming down into that turn 1 with a lot of speed coming through that.
I don't have the full data from Chris, unfortunately, but I can see that the left side of his car, in terms of tyre compounds, is absolutely screaming right now. We're seeing 110 plus degrees on core temperature, which if you know anything about F1, that is code speak for bad news. And lots of thermal degradation heading your way unless you get those temps seriously under control. So Chris is looking to be on the ropes. I think they're banking on here, going longer on those hards and hoping that those mediums will start to diminish in terms of pace to where he can catch back up in a controlled way.
Yeah, that would definitely be an interesting tactic to try and take, is to hope that Speeder and Freedom can fight it out and wear those tires down quite a bit so that he can, on those hards with twice as many laps, begin to catch up.
Yeah, and a catch-up he'll need to do, as now the top three are fully separated. Freedom, though, has had an incident. They have gone off on the inside, coming out of turn 12 there, heading into turn 13. Very rough innings for them. They're going to be damageless, but certainly going to be taking a bit of damage to the talent, as now they have dropped about 4 seconds and are going to be far adrift of Chris in P2. They're going to have some serious work cut out for them if they want to recover this race effort, and Speeder has effectively got away from it.
Yeah, damage to the talent, damage to the confidence for sure, is definitely going to have to put the gas on, have that push in him. And we've seen Freedom have that push in him to kind of make up those places, but definitely going to have a lot of work cut out for him in the next 13 laps to kind of get back into that fighting position. And with Speeder, who kind of at the moment is his on-track rival based off of the last race, based off of qualifying, is, you know, Freedom's in first place with 25 points, and then we have Speeder in second place with 19 points. So they're very close. And if Speeder can pull away on this race, he can take first place from Freedom there.
Yeah, Freedom's looking to break their curse, because this is far from a favorite for them. And we've known that from seasons past, that they have had issues here around this course in particular. So looking to break the curse, but in that effort so far doomed to repeat it. But we're soon going to be coming into the final third of the race. Ella's going to be going for a chance and an opportunity on P5, as they have been overtaken by Nico, but they're not going to let it slide without a fight. She's done a great run into turn 1 there, nicely sent through, keeping it clean throughout the entire time as well, and just within range of Minikai as well to make sure they got the DRS if they come through turn 9. Keep it like this and they're in very good form. Nicely done.
Yeah, and bearing in mind that Kai has that 3-second penalty as well. He's got to worry, or they've got to worry about that 3-second penalty, and Ella breathing down their neck. And it's, as our other F1 commentator, Morky Mork, would like to say, putting that soft pressure on them.
Yeah, that soft power, that soft pressure, that's one of my sort of favourite terms. But it is going to be sort of exerting that pressure from afar. It's those mind games almost, because being an F1 driver and being a driver in a series like this means that you're going to have to play the mental game just as much as the on-track one. It's about psyching out your opponents, building up that pressure, eventually forcing them to make a mistake, and you just capitalizing off of it. That's the ideal situation, where you just run your race and the other people fall around you. You can really use that kind of situation and that kind of setup, as we're seeing right here. Ella has got past Minikai now, and while that position isn't going to mean anything in the grand scheme of things, having them between herself and Nico is going to be a big help to get her a clean breakaway.
Yeah, it's definitely gonna help let Nico and Minikai have that kind of battle behind them, and kind of maybe take advantage of that. Nico is definitely on the pushing and catching up to Minikai there, and Ella's going to be wanting to take advantage of that, bearing in mind that she is at the front of that fight for P4.
We've got Batum, meanwhile, who's had a little bit of an incident out of turn 4 once again, so they're going to be dropping further down the order and down the timings. Unfortunate for them, but we will, of course, see them continue to fight on, continue to press on regardless. And that's another thing we have to commend, is the fact that even if you are so far adrift from the field as we are seeing Obituary do so here, they're still pushing on. They're still showing that sportsmanship, that commitment to the race, and that's what it's about just as much as performing well. So very nicely done from them. Minikai has been overtaken by Nico, but Nico is going to be under immediate counter, as the DRS is going to be in the red car's favor, and P5 is going to be swiftly retaken.
Yeah, and it seems like Ella has kind of pulled away now, has about 1.5 seconds between herself and Minikai, and is going to take advantage of that battle between Minikai and Nico happening, like we saw there coming down into turn 1. You know, Nico overtook Minikai on that straight, and then Minikai right back into that action, overtaking, taking back P5, and not giving Nico enough time to kind of recover from that initial attack, not having the time to defend himself from Minikai.
That's a solid result from them, and a solid result so far for the likes of, if we look to the front here, Speeder has now got 5.4 seconds away from Chris. Freedom has managed to close the gap a little bit more, and is now going to be quite the formidable opponent in the next couple of laps, because Chris is starting to see some of that pace drop off. We're not going to see them be able to push like they once did on those hard tires. And what we've got now is Freedom recovering the best they can from the situation. And even with those mediums still suffering a little bit of thermal damage and being pushed a bit too high in the temperatures department, at least from our internal telemetry, we are seeing them push and we are seeing them gain time.
Yeah, and Chris is definitely going to be struggling a little bit now that he has 17 laps on those hards, and Freedom only has, what, 7 laps on the mediums? So we've been talking time and time again today about Freedom having that push in him to kind of make up that time and make up those positions. And Chris is going to be feeling that soft pressure, that soft power, Freedom breathing down their neck and getting in their head to take that position from them. He's coming for it. He's got that push in him, and he's wanting to uphold that almost on track rivalry between himself and Speeder and not let Chris get in the way of that.
Yep, and they will not be deterred by such situations and circumstances. Around the track, we can see Obituary has gone for a pit stop here and is now 49 seconds behind. But on a fresh set of hards, they're going to be guaranteeing themselves they make it to the end of the race at the very least. And I think that's their priority right now. Just make it to the end, bring it home. Still could be some good points and some good kudos on the table. Minikai is going to continue to challenge alongside Nico, continue to be a thorn in their side as we head down in through the first sector. Nicely fought by the two of them. Every single joust between the two right now, though, is going to be giving Ella more and more of an advantage. She's over 2 seconds now, and that is going to only climb further. Get a good enough gap, and she might as well have P4 confirmed on the spot before the race ends. And then Freedom, 4/10 and counting.
Yeah, Freedom has that push. And going back to Ella will be happy with a P4. Bear in mind, was P3 last round after having that DQ in qualifying. I think if I remember the F1 drivers chat last week, it was a case of opened up the DRS coming out of that hairpin and just binned it into the wall. So we'll be pretty happy with a P4 out of this race, adding points onto her total.
Yeah, and those all-important points at this stage of the championship is going to be crucial. It's that early setup, that early game pressure on the rest of the opponents, and starting to establish yourself as a main fighter, a strong contender in this championship as it continues to unfold. We're seeing Freedom be within a couple of tenths of a second and fluctuating around that half-second mark. But that fight between the likes of Nico and Minikai continues to rage on down below. So let's trade our eyes to the top end for now, because it looks like Chris is starting to feel the pressure a little bit. The tires aren't playing ball. They're on the recharge ball, the battery here as well. Freedom looks like they are in prime spot to really start putting the hammer down.
Yeah, and a lot of wheel-to-wheel motorsport racing is kind of, when you're driving behind somebody, you can pick up on their habits as a driver. What are their plays usually? What, would get them out of a jam? And I think Freedom's kind of had that time behind Chris to learn those habits, to learn how Chris reacts to those situations, and is kind of using that to his advantage. He's coming in very close down that straight to Chris, not going for the overtake, but using that knowledge, putting that soft pressure, as we like to say, into the back of playing those mind games in the back of Chris's head and really closing down that gap.
Yep, and going to be closing that gap is the name of the game here. Even if you don't necessarily get the positions right away, you've got yourself a situation where you can continue to put that pressure down on your opponents. You can force them to be a little bit more reactionary, not necessarily settled within a rhythm, and breaking that mental fortitude is such a big part of what gets these overtakes done. We have seen a drop, however, from Minikai. They have unfortunately had a spin out of turn 4. They've taken some significant front wing damage on the right side. They're missing most of the elements of that front wing. But at this point in the race, it's not worth pitting in, to be perfectly honest. You've only got a few laps to go. It's not going to be worth any potential benefits per lap.
Yeah, and I think with Obituary being in P7, 55 seconds down, I think Minikai can probably just accept that they've taken P6 for this race. You know, they've still got that time penalty beside their name, have taken that wing damage, and would be, you know, can comfortably get to the end of this race and just cross that finish line and be done with it. Maybe not having the best performance in their eyes, but, you know, they've still managed to finish the race, and that always counts for something.
Yep, and finishing the race is going to be a very important factor. So, as much as these drivers will continue to push, and we are coming into the final 5 laps of racing now, all it takes is one bad corner, and it is game over for them. And they've got to be so careful of an ordeal like that.
Yeah, Freedom needs to be very careful of putting that pressure on Chris. You know, Chris is having those tires wear out, has a lot of laps on those hards. He needs to be careful he doesn't get too close. He doesn't want to be initiating contact between the two of them, because that would not be good.
Not be good at all, and you've got to be so careful. You've got to really be so careful in these final stages. It's all too easy to get overzealous, to get overconfident, and put yourself in a situation where you just push it too hard and drop it at the last hurdle. That's a big issue that I've seen many drivers fall into in the past, thinking, all right, we're just to the finish line. Let's just give it all full beans and see where we land. Doesn't always work out that way, and is going to be a pitfall that these drivers need to avoid at all costs.
Yeah, I think for the lower half of the runnings today, you know, Obituary and Minikai can kind of take it easy now. They've secured themselves P7 and P6 respectively, and those are good positions, you know. They haven't DNF'd, unlike 2 of our drivers today, unfortunately, for their sake. But you know, they have those positions and they can kind of ease off that pace and just nurse their cars back to the finish line. Whereas Freedom and Chris don't have that luxury. You know, they're still fighting for those positions. Ella is fighting off Nico. That gap between the two of them is closing fast. And Nico will probably be wanting to put a move on Ella for an overtake. Freedom overtakes Chris. Playing the long game has worked to his advantage there. Still not out of danger, but definitely has the advantage, being that is on those medium tires with not as many laps under his belt on them. And Chris's tires definitely seem to be fighting against him.
Yeah, the tires are the linchpin in this whole ordeal, because now we are seeing that come to fruition. We are seeing this situation, unfortunately, where the tires have been brought to their end point. They have been brought to their sort of logistical limit. And now it's going to be a difficult case where it's just got to make the best of it. This is the situation that all too many drivers can find themselves in, where they've given it their everything, they've gambled on a strategy, and it doesn't always pan out.
Yeah, like last week we saw some tire strategies that worked in people's favors, and maybe today just hasn't gone the way they had hoped or the way they had planned. Being that we had 2 safety cars, you know, somebody might have pitted a bit earlier than they had anticipated and thought that they had a little bit more wear in their tires for those pushing moments, but just the wear hasn't worked out how they initially anticipated it would go.
Well, we're going to be looking at about maybe 40 to 45% wear on the hard tires by this stage, although that's rough calculations. We don't actually have the data for Chris, and it's going to be a little bit of a guessing game for his case. But Freedom, we do know, is going to be around the 40 to 45% mark on the mediums as well. So we've got a rough equal point where Chris has had those tires for several laps longer, and the mediums are starting to take a little bit of a drop. But we've only got a few laps left, and big drama moment there for Freedom as they barely keep it within the track surface and barely keep it out of major trouble as they got themselves a little bit of a clenched moment. I'm sure they would have been freaking out there for a split second. And now they've got to go for that move all over again. Speeder has just crossed into the penultimate lap, and Freedom has got only a couple of chances left to make it back to P2.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate for Freedom, but he's going to be on that push, as we know he has been doing all this race. He's going to go for a move on Chris, but not quite make it out there. And he's going to fall back a little bit. Again, playing those mind games.
Yeah, he's baiting him out 100%. He's trying to get Chris to use the battery in defensive moves, all the while keeping his battery fully topped off. So the minute he goes for the move, he commits to it, pumps everything in the battery into the move, and doesn't have any means of counter from his opponent here. Ella, she's just got herself up into P4 against Nico here, and the both of them are having quite a fight after Minikai being dropped out of the picture meant that Nico was able to put some pace back down to the road. We've got two major battles kicking off at the same time here. We've got Freedom chasing down on Chris, and we've got Ella defending off of Nico. Eyes to the top, though, as we have Speeder, who's about to now cross into the final lap and mark the last-minute dash for these two drivers. Chris and Freedom both actually on pretty much full battery right now, so this is going to be a pure battle of wits and a battle of chicken as they both surge down through the final lap. It's a drag race. You've got Freedom on the inside, a little bit of squeeze going all the way in before dipping back out, just having a little bit more axle ahead, and that is the ticket. That's what they needed. Goes a little bit jumpy across the inside curbs of turn 2, but as they go through turn 3 here, still going to push those mediums to the absolute limit as we are coming through to the final moments of this race.
Yeah, and Freedom's going to have to be defending Chris till the bitter end of this lap. A little bit of contact there from Chris into the back of Freedom. Chris is definitely on the push, trying to get back to that position, wanting those points, those all-important points in the early stages of this series.
Big haul of points could mean massive movements in the championship here, and a big amount of switch-ups for some too. But we come through to the final few corners here, and we can see that one driver has had the quietest race of them all, but that's usually a sign of great things, and it is for Speeder as they come to the line and take the checkered flag here in the Spanish Grand Prix for Ireland Esports Collegiate Series. Freedom and Chris are going to be fighting all the way to the line, but in the end, it is going to be Freedom who just takes the cake with a P2, a solid run. Chris fights as much as they can, but it's only going to be P3, a solid podium, a fight to the finish, and then we see the rest of the field in tow.
Yeah, and Ella and Nico have been, while we've been watching the end of this race with Speeder crossing the finish line, Ella dropped back down to P5, Nico moved up to P4, and now has dropped back down to P5, and Ella has that second gap, so he doesn't get the DRS over the finish line and catch up. And that will be the end of this race. So the overall standings at the end of this race will be Speeder in P1, pole position, top of the podium winners, with Freedom very close in tow, Chris in P3. So those are our podium for today. Ella in P4, Nico P5, Minikai not having the best race for themselves out today in P6, and again with Obituary in P7, not the best race for them.
I believe that this is going to put Freedom and Speeder on equal points heading into the next round. Freedom got a win last time out, and the Speeder in a P2, and now we've seen those positions be inverted. So much to play for and much opportunity as we see, whoa, quite the somersault coming in from our eventual winner here. Speeder take a bow as we have seen a great race from them, and they got fastest lap to boot.
Yeah. And while we watch the podium ceremony going on, we would like to thank some more of our sponsors that make this event happen. You know, all of Irish Collegiate is not possible without the support of our lovely sponsors. So we'd like to thank Dogpatch Labs and KOKA Noodles for helping make this a possibility as we see the results from today's race. And there we go. Speeder gets an extra point for the fastest lap, a 1:14.291 as the fastest lap. And Freedom not too far behind, but just didn't have the pace in him today to take that pole position.
Yep, and I gotta say, Speeder has been nothing short of a tour de force tonight. They got the pole, they got the fastest lap, and they looked nigh on unstoppable for most of this race. They were unbothered, undisturbed by even when the couple of safety cars came around and they had a little bit of a back and forth with some of the other drivers. Once they were in their element, once they had a bit of space, as Chris and Freedom were left to their own devices, he was off into the distance, and that's all she wrote. So, Speeder, in particular, has absolutely dominated tonight's race and put themselves in a solid position heading into the rest of the calendar here.
Yeah, and Canada will be a tricky track for every driver in this series, but Speeder's definitely going to be in a better position than he was at the end of last week.